Christmas is supposed to be the most magical time of the year. Families reunite, tables overflow with food, laughter echoes through decorated halls. But for Maria Santos, this Christmas Eve in 2023 carried a pain that had grown heavier with each passing December. Her son Lucas hadn't been home for Christmas in 3 years, and as she stood in her empty kitchen preparing what felt like the most important dinner of her life, she wondered if this would be her last chance to bring him back. The house at 847 Maple Street had been their sanctuary for 28 years. Maria had raised Lucas there as a single mother after his father abandoned them when Lucas was only 4 years old. These walls had witnessed his first steps, his graduation day, his heartbreaks, and his dreams. But they had also witnessed their biggest fight 3 years ago, the argument that drove her son away and left Maria spending every Christmas since then eating alone at a table set for two. It started the day after Lucas graduated from college with his business degree. Maria was so proud, having worked double shifts at the diner for 4 years to pay his tuition, sacrificing everything so he could have the education she never had. But instead of gratitude, Lucas looked at her with something that broke her heart. Embarrassment. He was embarrassed by their small house, by her waitressing job, by the fact that they'd never had much money. "Mom, I got a job offer in the city," he told her that morning, not meeting her eyes. "It's a great opportunity. I'm going to take it." Maria was thrilled for him, of course. Her son was going to be successful. Everything she'd worked for was paying off. But then he added something that would haunt her for years. "I think it's time for me to start fresh, build my own life without all this holding me back." All this, their home, their memories, her, that first Christmas without him. Maria convinced herself it was just an adjustment period. New job, new life, she understood. She cooked his favorite dinner anyway, set his place at the table, and waited until midnight before finally accepting that he wasn't coming. She called him that night, and he answered with the sound of a party in the background. "Mom, I can't talk right now. I'm at my boss's Christmas party. This is important for my career." Click, dial tone. The silence in her house felt deafening. The second Christmas was worse. By then, Lucas had gotten a promotion and moved to an expensive apartment downtown. Maria had seen pictures on his social media. Sleek furniture, city views, a life that looked nothing like the modest home where she'd raised him. When she called to invite him for Christmas dinner, his new girlfriend answered the phone. "Oh, hi, Mrs. Santos. Lucas is in the shower. We're actually flying to my parents' ski lodge in Aspen for the holidays. Such a last-minute thing. You know how it is?" No, Maria didn't know how it was. She'd never been able to afford last-minute trips to ski lodges. She'd never been able to afford much of anything except love, which apparently wasn't enough anymore. That Christmas, Maria still cooked dinner. She still set two places. And she still waited, even though she knew he wouldn't come. Now it was year 3, and something had changed inside Maria. Maybe it was a diagnosis she received 2 weeks ago. Stage 2 breast cancer, caught early but requiring immediate treatment. Maybe it was a realization that she was 62 years old and had spent her entire adult life devoted to a son who seemed to have erased her from his new, improved existence. Or maybe it was a conversation she'd overheard at the grocery store 3 days earlier. Maria was buying ingredients for Christmas dinner when she saw Lucas's best friend from high school, David, with his mother. They didn't see her, but she heard David tell his mother, "Yeah, Lucas is doing really well. Big promotion, fancy girlfriend, penthouse apartment. Though honestly, Mom, I think he's kind of ashamed of where he came from. He never talks about his mom anymore. It's like she doesn't exist in his new world. David's mother had clicked her tongue in disapproval. That's such a shame. Maria Santos is one of the kindest women I've ever met. She sacrificed everything for that boy. Standing there in aisle 7, holding a bag of potatoes, Maria felt something break inside her. But it wasn't her heart breaking again, it was her denial breaking. For 3 years, she'd been making excuses for Lucas, telling herself he was just busy, just adjusting, just finding his way. But the truth was simpler and more painful. Her son was ashamed of her. That night, Maria made a decision. She would cook one last Christmas dinner. She would set the table one last time. And if Lucas didn't come home, she would finally let go. She would sell the house, move to a smaller place closer to the hospital for her treatments, and stop waiting for a son who had clearly decided she wasn't worth his time. But first, she would give him one final chance to remember who he used to be. Maria spent the next 3 days cooking like her life depended on it. Lucas's favorite tamales, the recipe passed down from her grandmother, the pozole that took 12 hours to make properly, simmering on the stove until the hominy was perfect, tres leches cake that she'd made for every birthday of his childhood, churros dusted with cinnamon sugar, the treats she used to make when he'd had a bad day at school, the house filled with the aromas of her childhood, her mother's childhood, generations of women who had poured love into food because sometimes food was all they had to give. She decorated every room, even though it was just for her. Lights strung around every window. The nativity scene Lucas had made in 2nd grade displayed prominently on the mantel. Stockings hung by the fireplace, even though there had been no Santa in their house for years. She even wrapped presents for him. Not expensive gifts. She couldn't afford those, but meaningful ones. A photo album of his childhood, carefully preserved through the years. A handwritten letter she'd never had the courage to send, telling him how proud she was, how much she loved him, how sorry she was if she'd somehow failed him as a mother. A small wooden cross that had belonged to his grandmother, the woman who'd taught Maria that love was the only currency that really mattered in this life. Christmas Eve morning, Maria called him one last time. Her hands were shaking as she dialed the number she knew by heart, but rarely used anymore. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His voice, professional and distant. "You've reached Lucas Santos. Please leave a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." "Mijo," she said, using the pet name she called him since he was a baby, its mom. "I'm making Christmas dinner today. All your favorites. I know you're probably busy, but if you can find the time, I'd love to see you. I miss you so much, Lucas. I miss my son." Maria almost hung up there, but something made her continue. Maybe it was a knowledge that this might be her last chance to say these words. "I know I'm not the mother you wanted. I know our house isn't fancy, and I know I don't fit into your new life. But I want you to know that every single day you've been gone, I've thought about you. Every Christmas dinner I've cooked alone, I've imagined you sitting across from me, telling me about your day, your dreams, your life. I love you more than my own life. Mijo, I always have, and I always will. Come home tonight, if you can. Please." She hung up and immediately regretted the message. It sounded desperate, pathetic. Everything Lucas probably thought she was. But it was too late now. The day passed slowly. Maria cooked. She cleaned. She rearranged the decorations. She changed clothes 3 times, wanting to look perfect for a son who might not even show up. Finally, she settled on the blue dress she'd worn to his college graduation, the one he'd complimented her on that day before everything changed between them. As the sun set on Christmas Eve, Maria set the table with her mother's good china, the set she'd inherited when she died and had been saving for special occasions. What occasion could be more special than potentially the last Christmas dinner she might share with her son? She lit candles throughout the house, their warm glow making everything look magical. Outside, she could hear families arriving at neighbors' houses, car doors slamming, children laughing, the sounds of normal families celebrating normal Christmases. Inside her house, there was only silence and the tick of the grandfather clock that had been her mother's pride and joy. 7 o'clock came and went, then 8, then 9. Maria sat in her living room, wearing her best dress, listening for the sound of a car in the driveway that never came. The food was ready, keeping warm in the oven. The presents were under the tree, wrapped with ribbons she'd saved from previous years because she couldn't afford new ones. At 10 o'clock, her neighbor Mrs. Chun knocked on the door. She was carrying a plate of cookies and wearing a concerned expression. "Maria, dear, I saw your lights on. Are you spending Christmas alone again?" Maria forced a smile, the same smile she perfected over the past 3 years. "Oh no, Mrs. Chun. Lucas might still come. He's very busy, you know. Important job in the city." Mrs. Chun studied Maria's face with the wisdom that came from raising 5 children of her own. "Maria, honey, you can't keep doing this to yourself. That boy needs to know what he's lost, but you can't lose yourself waiting for him to figure it out." After Mrs. Chin left, Maria sat in her recliner, the same chair where she'd rocked Lucas to sleep when he was a baby, where she'd helped him with homework, where she'd listened to his teenage problems and dreams. She pulled out her phone and looked at his social media one more time. There he was, at some fancy restaurant downtown, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. He was laughing at something his girlfriend had said, his arm around her waist, champagne glasses in front of them. The caption read, "Perfect Christmas Eve dinner at Chez Laurent with my beautiful Amanda. Life is good." Maria's heart broke all over again, but this time it was different. This time, she felt something she'd never allowed herself to feel before. Anger. Not just sadness or disappointment, but real anger. How dare he? How dare he post pictures of his perfect life while his mother sat alone, waiting for him like a fool? She'd worked 16-hour days to pay for his college. She'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner, so he could have real meals. She'd worn the same coat for 8 years, so he could have new clothes for school. She'd given him everything she had to give, and he'd repaid her by pretending she didn't exist. The clock struck 11, and Maria made a decision. She wasn't going to wait anymore. She was done being the pathetic mother who cooked dinner for a son who would never come home. She was done setting a place at the table for someone who was ashamed of her. She was done breaking her own heart over and over again. Maria started to blow out the candles, to put away the food, to take down the decorations that suddenly seemed foolish and sad. But as she reached for the first candle, she heard a sound that made her freeze. A car door slamming in her driveway. Her heart stopped. After 3 years of waiting, after 3 years of disappointment, could it really be him? Maria crept to the window and peeked through the curtains. There, illuminated by her Christmas lights, was Lucas. But he wasn't the confident businessman from the social media photos. He was crying. He stood beside his expensive car, a BMW she'd never seen before, with his hands over his face, sobbing like he hadn't cried since he was a little boy. He was still wearing his fancy suit from dinner, but it was wrinkled now, his tie loose around his neck. He looked lost, broken, nothing like the successful man he portrayed online. Maria watched through the window as he pulled out his phone and seemed to be listening to something. Then she realized what it was. He was listening to the voicemail she'd left that morning. Her voice, telling him she loved him, asking him to come home. As the recorded words played, his crying intensified. When the message ended, he looked up at the house, their house, as if seeing it for the first time in years. And maybe he was. Maybe success had blinded him to everything that had come before, and now he was finally seeing clearly. He walked slowly to the front door, his steps hesitant like a child who wasn't sure if he was in trouble. Maria heard his key in the lock. He kept his key all these years, and then the door opened slowly. "Mom!" His voice was small, uncertain. "Mom, are you awake?" Maria came around the corner, and the sight of him took her breath away. He was taller than she remembered, more handsome, but there was something hollow in his eyes that hadn't been there when he lived here. Success hadn't filled the empty spaces in his soul. It had only made them more apparent. "I got your message," he said, his voice breaking. "I was at dinner, this expensive place downtown, posting pictures and pretending everything was perfect, but all I could think about was you, alone in this house, cooking my favorite food, waiting for me like you have every year." He looked around the living room, taking in the decorations, the carefully arranged nativity scene, the stockings hung with care. "I drove here after dinner. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, listening to your voicemail over and over. Mom, what have I done? What kind of person have I become?" Maria wanted to run to him, to hold him, to tell him it was okay, that all was forgiven, but something held her back. Maybe it was the anger she'd finally allowed herself to feel, or maybe it was the knowledge that they needed to have this conversation, really have it, before they could move forward. "I don't know Lucas," she said quietly. "What kind of person have you become?" He flinched as if she'd slapped him. "I become someone I don't recognize. Someone who's ashamed of the woman who sacrificed everything for him. Someone who abandoned his mother because her love wasn't sophisticated enough for his new life." The tears were flowing freely now, and seeing him cry made Maria's own eyes fill. But she didn't move toward him yet. "Why, Mijo? Why wasn't I enough anymore?" "It wasn't that you weren't enough," he said, collapsing onto the sofa where they'd watched movies together throughout his childhood. "It was that I wasn't enough. In the city, with my new job, everyone came from money. They went to private schools, had trust funds, spent more on dinner than you made in a week. I was so afraid they'd find out I was just some poor kid whose mom was a waitress. So you erased me," Maria said, the words coming out harder than she'd intended. "Yes." His admission was barely a whisper. "I erased you because I was a coward. I was so busy trying to prove I belonged in their world that I forgot I already belonged somewhere. Here, with you." Maria sat down across from him, the coffee table between them feeling like a canyon. "Do you know what the hardest part was, Lucas? It wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't even the disappointment. It was seeing you on social media, living this life, being happy without me in it. It was realizing that the person I loved most in the world was better off pretending I didn't exist." "But I wasn't better off," he said desperately. "I haven't been happy for 3 years. Every success felt hollow because I had no one real to share it with. Amanda, my girlfriend, she's beautiful and smart and from the right family, but she doesn't know me. Not really. How could she? I've been pretending to be someone else for so long. I forgot who I really was." "And who are you really?" Maria asked. He looked around the room again, his eyes landing on the photo album she'd left on the side table, the one filled with pictures of his childhood. "I'm the kid who used to help you fold laundry every Sunday while we watched old movies. I'm the teenager who used to walk you to work when your car broke down, because I was worried about you walking alone at night. I'm the son of Maria Santos, the strongest woman I've ever known, who worked herself to the bone so I could have opportunities she never had. Now Maria was crying too. Then why did you leave me, Mijo? Why did you stay away so long? Because I was stupid, he said simply. Because I thought success meant leaving everything behind, including the people who loved me unconditionally. Because I listened to voices that told me I needed to be ashamed of where I came from instead of proud of how far we'd traveled together. He slid off the sofa and onto his knees in front of her, taking her hands in his. They were softer than she remembered, manicured and smooth. Success hands. But they were still her son's hands. Mom, I came home tonight because I realized something. I've been living a lie for 3 years. I've been trying to be someone I'm not, impressing people who don't really care about me, building a life that looks good from the outside but feels empty on the inside. And tonight, at that fancy restaurant, surrounded by all the success I thought I wanted, all I could think about was you, alone in this house, still loving me despite everything I put you through. I never stopped loving you, Maria whispered. Even when I was angry, even when I felt forgotten, I never stopped loving you. I know, he said. That's what makes this so much worse. You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. You never stopped being my mother, even when I stopped being your son. You never stopped being my son, Lucas. You just forgot for a while. He looked toward the dining room, where the table was still set with her mother's china, the candles still burning, the feast still waiting. You made dinner. After 3 years of me not showing up, you still made dinner. I make dinner every year, Maria admitted. Every Christmas Eve, I cook all your favorite foods and set your place at the table. Every year, I wait until midnight, and then I put it all away and spend Christmas Day alone. The look of pain that crossed his face was almost unbearable. Oh, Mom, what have I done to you? You forgot where you came from, Maria said. But forgetting isn't unforgivable. What matters is that you remembered. He stood up slowly, pulling her to her feet. Can we eat dinner together? Please? I know it's late. I know I don't deserve it. But can we sit at that table and pretend it's 3 years ago, before I became someone I hate? Maria studied his face. This man who was her baby, her little boy, her greatest achievement and her greatest heartbreak. He was different now. Older, more polished, marked by success and guilt in equal measure. But underneath all of that, she could still see the sweet child who used to bring her dandelions and call them flowers, who used to save half his Halloween candy for her, who used to tell her she was the most beautiful woman in the world. We can't pretend it's 3 years ago, she said finally. Too much has happened. We've both been hurt, and we both learned things about ourselves that we didn't want to know. But we can start from where we are right now, tonight, and build something new. His smile, when it came, was like sunrise after the longest night of Maria's life. They walked into the dining room together, and Maria began bringing out the food she kept warm all evening. Tamales and pozole, rice and beans, fresh tortillas and salsa verde. The feast of their people, their history, their love. As they filled their plates, Lucas told her about his life. Not the sanitized version he shared on social media, but the real story. He told her about the loneliness of his expensive apartment, about colleagues who invited him to parties but didn't really know him, about a girlfriend who loved the image he projected but had never seen him vulnerable or real. He told her about lying awake at night, wondering if success was supposed to feel so empty, if achievement was supposed to come at the cost of everyone who had helped him achieve it. I thought about calling you 1,000 times, he said as they ate the tres leches cake she'd made from scratch. But I was too proud, too ashamed. I'd been away so long, I didn't know how to come back. You just walked through the door, Mijo, Maria said. That's all you ever had to do. Just walk through the door. As they talked, the years of hurt and misunderstanding began to dissolve. Not all at once. Some wounds would take time to heal, but enough for them to see each other clearly for the first time in years. He saw her not as an embarrassment to be hidden, but as a woman who had loved him so completely that she'd shaped her entire life around his needs and dreams. She saw him not as the ungrateful son who'd abandoned her, but as a young man who'd lost his way in the maze of other people's expectations. It was nearly 2 a.m. when they finally finished eating. They'd talk about everything: his job, which he was realizing he hated, his girlfriend, who was planning to break up with, his future, which suddenly seemed uncertain but full of possibilities. Most importantly, they'd talked about how to rebuild a relationship that had been broken by pride and fear and the terrible assumption that love wasn't enough. I want to come home more often, he said as they cleared the dishes together, falling into the old rhythm of him washing while she dried. Not to live. I know we both need our independence now, but to visit, to be part of your life again, to remember who I am when I'm with you. I'd like that, Maria said. But Lucas, I need you to understand something. I won't be waiting by the phone anymore. I won't be setting a place at the table unless you tell me you're coming. I love you more than life itself, but I can't go back to breaking my own heart over and over again. He nodded, his face serious. I understand. I need to earn your trust again. I need to prove that I'm not the person I became for those 3 years. As he prepared to leave, it was too late for him to drive back to the city safely, but he insisted he'd already gotten a hotel room nearby. Maria gave him the presents she'd wrapped. He opened them slowly, carefully, as if they were precious artifacts. The photo album made him cry again. Page after page of memories he'd tried to leave behind. Birthday parties in their small backyard. Christmas mornings when presents were few but love was abundant. School plays where Maria was always in the front row cheering him on. Graduation day when she worked overtime for months to buy him a suit, and he told her she was the best mom in the world. I threw away copies of some of these pictures, he admitted. When I moved to the apartment, I thought they didn't fit my new image. God, Mom, what was wrong with me? You were trying to become someone else, Maria said. Sometimes we have to lose ourselves completely before we can find our way back to who we really are. The letter made him sob, really sob like a child. In it, Maria had told him about her diagnosis, about her treatment starting after the new year, about how proud she was of his success even though it had taken him away from her. She told him about the lonely Christmases, but also about the joy she felt every time she saw him happy in his photos, even if she wasn't part of that happiness. You have cancer? He whispered, looking up from the letter with horror in his eyes. Early stage, Maria said quickly, very treatable. The doctor says with treatment, my prognosis is excellent. And you were going through this alone, because I wasn't here, because I abandoned you when you needed me most. You're here now, Maria said firmly. That's what matters. You're here now. The wooden cross was the gift that seemed to affect him most deeply. It had belonged to his grandmother, Maria's mother, who had died when he was 12. She'd adored Lucas, called him her little prince, taught him Spanish songs, and told him stories about their family's journey from Mexico to California. She loved you so much, Maria said as he held the cross with reverent hands. Before she died, she made me promise that I'd give this to you when you became a man. I've been waiting for the right moment. Why now? He asked. Because tonight, you became the man she always knew you could be. Not because you're successful or wealthy or impressive to others. Because you had the courage to come home and face the truth about what you'd lost. When he finally left, promising to call her the next day, to come back for New Year's Eve, to be present in ways he hadn't been for years, Maria stood in her doorway watching his car disappear into the night. The house felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. The silence wasn't loneliness anymore. It was a quiet that comes after a storm has passed. She cleaned up the last of the dishes, blew out the candles, and sat in her recliner with a cup of tea. Outside, the first light of Christmas Day was beginning to creep across the sky. It had been the longest Christmas Eve of her life, but also the most important. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Lucas. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for cooking dinner every year, even when I didn't come. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. I love you, Mom. Merry Christmas. Maria typed back, Merry Christmas, Mijo. Welcome home. This Christmas had taught Maria something profound about love, that it's not about holding on so tightly that you lose yourself, but about loving someone so completely that you're willing to let them go, trusting that if they're truly yours, they'll find their way back. Lucas had found his way back not because she'd waited for him, but because love had finally called louder than pride. As she turned off the lights and headed to bed, Maria thought about all the mothers and sons, fathers and daughters, families and friends who were separated by misunderstanding, pride, fear, or the simple assumption that love would always be there waiting no matter how long they stayed away. Life is fragile, and the people we love are gifts that shouldn't be taken for granted. Christmas isn't about the presents under the tree or the food on the table, though those things are lovely. Christmas is about coming home, to the people who love you, to the person you really are, to the grace that's always available if we're humble enough to accept it. It's about second chances and forgiveness, about the courage to admit when we're wrong, and the wisdom to welcome someone back even when they've hurt us. Maria's son had come home for Christmas, not because she begged or demanded or manipulated, but because love had finally conquered pride. And sometimes that's the greatest gift of all, not getting what we want, but discovering that what we need has been there all along, waiting patiently for us to be ready to receive it.